Hello, my name is Omar Dabous. I go under the pseudonym Dabu.
I'm Simon Swerve.
I was born and raised in Kuwait, miles away from here. Did all the wrong things, never learned piano, never listened to the parents, never took the lessons, but somehow found myself in a place I really like to be.
I had piano lessons, and then I picked up guitar when I was in my early 20s. And then I discovered Bob Dylan at the same time, folk Dylan. I am one of the composers of the Dwarf Fortress soundtrack.
I just remember being somewhere and there was talks of like, yeah, there's a game that's spinning up, and I didn't know what the game was, and I wasn't told what it was.
This game is great. It inspires me so clearly. You know, I can draw a line in my life where I discovered it, and how it affected my thought patterns, even to an extent.
Some kind of sieve where you control things, and still didn't know what the name was. Got a good idea that there were dwarves involved. Didn't have the contract, didn't have anything. Was like, okay, making music for this game, and it came to be that first song that was on the album.
Now that we have the introductions out of the way, I was really curious about how Simon and Dabu both ended up making music, and also how they discovered Dwarf Fortress. In the case of Simon, for those of you who've been in the community for a while, you've probably encountered his music, most likely as something that was included in the SoundSense add-on for DF Hack. And if you are unfamiliar with Simon's music, I will leave a link to his SoundCloud in the description of this video. While I was familiar with Simon's work, Dabu was a bit more of a mystery to me, so I wanted to know more about the early days, how Dabu got into music, and what led to him being involved with the project.
I feel like I always loved music. I know my dad was also really into music, and once upon a time I think he went to his father and said, you know, I'd like to play the accordion for the Egyptian Philharmonic or something like that. And his dad was like, absolutely not, that's not going to happen. And so when I kind of came of age and asked my dad, like, hey, I like music, I want to do stuff like that, he was like, you know, I'm not going to tell you what my father told me, but at the same time, I grew up in a household where I had to be a little bit more pragmatic with how I approach things, and my intention was always to get into audio, sound design, do audio for film and TV, and maybe on the side do music. I used to DJ a bunch of house parties in Kuwait, illegal and legal. And then when I moved to Montreal, I won a DJ contest at an after-hours club, and so I was the resident DJ there for a while. But then when my father passed away, I had to find a real job that paid real money without the make it or break it type thing that DJing and music comes with. I think the DJing stuff was taking off quite a bit and got me in touch with a bunch of people. We did a bunch of shows with some artists from around the world, and that was really fun. And my brother had moved to Montreal before I did from Kuwait as well, and kind of mentioned that Concordia University has this program called electroacoustics, which is kind of a bridge between those two things. You can learn a lot about audio, a lot about mixing, a lot about mastering, but not in the most traditional way. It wasn't an audio engineering school, and so I applied. I remember the application process was bizarre. I had to record an electroacoustic piece of music. I don't know if you're familiar with what electroacoustic music sounds like, but it's bizarre and weird and fun. And so I remember recording coins spinning on different surfaces and just stitching all of those together. And I called it Wishing Well, and I submit my application. I got put into a holding pattern for a while, and then one day I got that email that was like, okay, you've been accepted. And I came here. It was like 40 people, I think, in the program at the time. It's grown quite a bit, but I heard that they're having trouble now again. Never had a PC, but had a Dreamcast when I was a kid. Had an Xbox, and then just used to play a bunch of video games there. When I was doing all the DJ stuff here and my dad passed away, I had just graduated university, I think the week after he had passed away, and it became a pressing need to get a job and fund myself and rent and payments and bills and all that kind of stuff that comes with, you know, adulting. And I couldn't yell for, I need an adult. I had to be the adult at that time. My brother started a company called Co-op, and Co-op shared an office with KidFox. And so I did consulting work for them, and yeah, the rest is history kind of thing.
But what about Simon? With his extensive history with Dwarf Fortress, I anticipated that his career would likely be more entwined with the game. And it seems like there's at least some accuracy to my suspicions.
I was performing a bit like in clubs and places around South Africa where I'm from. But since I was doing a exchange program, I was kind of spread out a bit. So I never really set down the roots as a performer anywhere, you know. Then at one point I was in the Netherlands actually, and I discovered Dwarf Fortress. And I guess from that point on, it's a different story. Okay, so at that point I was composing a lot of stuff, but in my native language, in Afrikaans. And then again, I discovered it around 2011, I think, 2012, right? So I was composing music for other things, and then I also had this really old, crappy laptop that I couldn't really play a lot of games on. So I was looking for stuff. I think I found out about it the first time on Minecraft forums, but since I couldn't play Minecraft, I guess, when don't you give Dwarf Fortress a try? So I downloaded it. I noticed that it didn't have an installer, just like the executable in the root directly. So I opened it up, and beyond quality, the whole introduction and everything. And then I was hit like with the menu, with that's iconic soundtrack and like the black background, and I was immediately intrigued. I've seen ASCII games before, but something just hit different. And then I don't know, watching worlds get generated, and then you don't even realize that you were just one fortress in multiple worlds. These kinds of things you discover over time. So I don't know. I was, long story short, blasted away by it. I discovered sound sense as well, because I lost too many fortresses not knowing what was going on. I didn't notice a notification came up that like 7 units had died. So I started playing sound sense a lot, and I thought like, okay, so maybe I can contribute to it a bit, because a lot of the songs were like open source or not open source, what's it called? Creative Commons. So I published some songs on Reddit over a span of like a month and a half, because it was the summer. So I had to get back to the studies. But that was like a nice little window where I could just explore different musical avenues. And yeah, I fell in love with the game, and I loved making music for the game.
The worlds in Dwarf Fortress are procedurally generated. This means every single one of them is different from the one before. And that really had me wondering, how does one write music for a game that does not have a set story, or a world with much consistency? On top of that, Simon was singing in a language that he didn't even speak, and one that doesn't even exist. The language in the game is a collection of words that can be loosely tied together with context, but it lacks the same kind of structure as most modern languages. I wanted to know what his process was.
The stories really inspired me. At some point I wanted to try to convey the stories into song. So I tried to create like narrative music, like Cobalt March, for example, and Ineth and North Travel North. These were kind of, at least my headspace was to tell these stories, but just musically, I had some wiggle room, I guess, because you can put some details into the title. But I wanted to tell the stories that I experienced playing the game. So this messed up thing just happened. A unicorn killed like my favorite dwarf. So how can I make that a song? The inspiration came from playing the game, and that just feeding whatever emotion could also like inspire or like create something similar in music. Okay, so as I mentioned, I was a student. But I studied linguistics. So it's not like I said, okay, so I studied linguistics, hence I can do this. No, it was more like I was extremely interested in language and structures, and I think it just came kind of naturally. I thought like, okay, the game has its own language. Try to work something out there. Obviously, it's kind of complicated if you don't have the glue that connects words, like different words. You don't have pronouns. I think you have like a word for one, but you don't have the, you don't have or an or they. So you kind of have to improvise. Yeah, but I think contextually, though, most people can figure it out. I've read that there are languages that are kind of contextual in that way, where you're able to get away with just having nouns and verbs, and from the context you can kind of figure out what it means. specifically for Dwarf Fortress, though, I think the first one that I did with lyrics was Tankard Basher, and that one I did kind of the hard way, which is to say I was like scrolling through the language files and like writing down words that I find interesting and just connecting them and seeing or trying to figure out what sounds good, what doesn't, And it's hit and miss, but it's a lot of fun. And so I ended up, because around that time I also became a coder, so I ended up writing like a little WPF application just to help me filter words and find not synonyms but like instances of alliteration, and from that point on it became easier. But I know there are people that think that I know the languages by heart, but it's not true. I mean, who would I practice with? So yeah, I made myself tools to help me with that process. The ones that I prefer are the ones that, looking back, would be hard for me to do again, in a sense, like, because sometimes I listen to these ones that I like and I think like, where was I when I wrote this? What was going on? And so I actually do like Enith and Odd Travel North and Cobalt March, actually. I mean, I also have a soft spot for Tankard Basher because it's like the first one that had lyrics and it's more canonically dwarfy, and rowdy.
The idea of modernizing Dwarf Fortress had existed for a while at this point. It was roughly 2017, perhaps even 2018, and Tanya Short had pitched the idea of publishing Dwarf Fortress on Steam in order to help out Zach and Tarn financially. Zach had had a medical scare, which, if Tarn was in a similar position, it would have ruined him. Working on a crowdfunded indie game doesn't exactly come with health insurance. And while the game did have that original small loop of music that was recorded by Tarn, in order to have a full release on Steam, it would need a soundtrack. And that's when Dabu entered the picture.
I honestly can't tell you I know the exact month or date or even the year. I just remember being somewhere and there was talks of like, yeah, there's a game that's spinning up, and I didn't know what the game was and I wasn't told what it was. But having worked with Kit Fox on their previous project, Boyfriend Dungeon, I think at one point in time, Tanya Short, she asked me if I'd be interested in making a couple of songs here and there for a game they're working on, or a game someone was producing. It was very vague, and I wasn't sure, and I was like, being a new composer, being a new person in games, a new person in sound design at that time, I was like, absolutely, I'd love to have the opportunity to work on something like that. I think it was sometime around 2019, and I remember kind of getting the green light, going home. They explained to me very briefly that it's like, some kind of civ where you control things, and still didn't know what the name was. Got a good idea that there were dwarves involved and settlements and things like that. And I remember I went home and I wrote the first song. Back then it was called Fall. I think now it's called First Year. And yeah, I remember writing that song, I think 95% that night. I went home, didn't have the contract, didn't have anything. Was like, okay, making music for this game. And it came to be that first song that was on the album. And then once I found out what it was a fairly small contract. I think we wanted to do all 4 seasons, fall, winter, spring, and then one song for Death Spiral, which is why you'll see there's 4 solo songs on the first album, which I had written before meeting with anyone else. Tarn has the best responses to music. He just kind of writes little essays on what he envisions when he listens to the song, and it's the best thing. I love sending Tarn music. But I remember sending Tarn a song or two, and as I was reading through it and the months were ticking by, I think we found out that there was a little bit of buzz behind the game, and then it seemed more and more important to add more and more music and really do the game justice, especially as I learned more about the project as well, because I was not as familiar with Dwarf Fortress as some of the rest of those folks were.
Initially, Dabu was the only composer on the project, but as the scope began to expand and the need for more music became apparent, I wanted to know exactly when did Simon enter the picture.
I think you kind of said it right there, is that so many people associated Dwarf Fortress and Dwarf Fortress music with Simon, and as I did my own research, like you do on any project, I came across his name multiple times, so did the team, and I feel like as we understood we really had to do the release justice, that it seemed like we had to reach out to Simon and see if he would be willing to make music for the game.
I think it was 2019, but I basically got an email from the musical director and Kid Fox, and there wasn't a lot of mystery to it. I obviously said yes because I love making music for Dwarf Fortress. I have so many ideas that I want to turn into songs.
And I think Tanya had reached out to him and said, would you be willing to work on the game? He got back and was like, absolutely. And then she was like, okay, here, go talk to each other, figure it out, and make music, I guess.
I had a few songs already to contribute, but the Dabu would be able to tell you more about how the entire structure, the overall picture of it.
But then when I again found out what the project was, and as time kind of went on and the project started to sink, I realized I would love to make a very cohesive album rather than a compilation album where I'm contributing a little bit. Ageda, the Gamba Geek, who did 2 songs, was contributing a little bit, and then Simon was contributing a little bit, and I felt like it would just not work as nicely or as well. So I reached out to both of them. We made our little private Discord, and I was like, hey, here's the pitch. Would you be willing to do a collab where either I'm writing the bones of a song and you're adding stuff to it, or vice versa? And then we just file dumped a bunch of stuff between each other on a Discord and started picking at what do we want to work on, what don't we want to work on, what do we want to save for the future, what's difficult, what's not difficult. And yeah, there's a lot to talk about there.
My role was more just composing and doing what I love, and the stitching together at least was less on my side. I obviously contributed. I have some songs that I had in my arsenal at that point.
I think we align really well on what works and what doesn't, and very rarely have we ever had creative differences. I think the biggest issues we've ever run up against are just recording quality and hiss, noise, microphone issues, and that was a huge issue on the theme, which is easily the most difficult song we worked on.
Things changed in the sense that I can focus completely on just playing guitar, adding 1 or 2 or 3 tracks to a song and just composing and having fun with stuff. So, and then when I was done, I would I submit what I have, very different from what I'm used to, but also much more fun for me at least, because I don't focus on specifically the mixing or the mastering. I have my ideas for stuff that we can put in there, but ultimately Dabu stitches it together.
Sometimes the bones of a song are written by Simon, who's either written it recently or a long time ago, and will kind of send it to me and say, hey, this is this thing, what do you think? And I'll kind of take it, add a bunch of stuff to it, production-wise, whether that's drums, bass, strings, the pads, things like that, and then some mandolin, guitars, send it back, and then he'll assess. I feel like we have a good relationship when it comes to when he's sending me something that he worked on. I treat it like his child. I don't want to mess with it too much, and when I give it back to him, whatever he kind of wants out of it, I'd like to achieve. And then he does the same with me. So I'll, on other songs on the album, I would have written the bones of a song, send it to him and say, I really like this. Either I'll say I would love there to be a little bit of a vocal stem over here, or a little bit of a guitar riff over here, and other times I just send it to him and say, I don't know, what do you think? And he'll send it back with some accompaniment and ask me, like, do you think this is okay? Do you think that is okay? So it really depends on the song, and I've always wondered if people know, like, which ones are the Simon songs and which ones are the Dabu songs, and I'm glad that on adventure mode it became much more difficult to tell, because it very much became like the drafts, the rough drafts we were sending would slowly just, you forget who's doing what. And I remember early on I used to separate like some of the riffs I'm coming up with on the left speaker and some of the riffs he was coming up with on the right speaker, and it would always be like we were having a conversation, silly audio stuff where, because I'm on the west side of the world and he's on the east, he's always on the right speaker, I'm always on the left speaker, random shit like that you get stoned and you come up with ideas that no one's ever going to think about or realize, but that was one of those things. And then on adventure mode it became a lot more blurred, because it was going back and forth a little bit more. Yeah, I think we could have an entire interview just on the theme song and the decisions that we made on the theme song and how it all went down. There was no guideline from Tarn to say, like, I really need that song in there, right? But the community definitely would have expected it, right? There's an expectation that that song needs to live in some shape or form somewhere on the Steam release. And so when did we start working on it? It was the absolute last song that we worked on. It came in at the 11th hour. I think it was ready a week before Steam release was out. And we were on the 31st version. It was unbelievable. The only song that we've had multiple versions of. And I remember it's always, I thought about it like this mountain that I had to climb. And I for the entire time that I was working on Dwarf Fortress and the soundtrack, I would circle the mountain and be like, how are we going to climb this? How are we going to climb this? Where are we going to approach it from? Are we going to do a remaster? Are we going to do a reimagining? And it would just bounce between reimagine, remaster, remaster, reimagine. Well, if we do a remaster, people will be like, oh, they just remastered and it sounds too clean because we like that shitty sound that it has with the fucking hiss, because he recorded it into his laptop and it's very poor quality. And it's like stream of consciousness chord progression, and it's mesmerizing. It's almost like hypnotic when you listen to it, especially as a person who's not attached to Dwarf Fortress, didn't know much about the game, listening to it for the first time, it's got a weird kind of trancey vibe to it. So as I went back and forth thinking about it, I ended up asking Tarn for all the original files that he had, and it turns out he didn't have any of the original files. He just had those two MP3s, one of the main theme and the other one, which is like the title theme. And I downloaded those, I put them into my DAW, and then I just Frankenstein stitched everything I loved about it and everything I thought didn't work and I couldn't bridge the gap between. And I also fell in love with the intro that used to exist on the old game, which is like a little dwarf digging, and then he goes, whoa! And so if you notice on a lot of the Fortress mode and even the Adventure mode soundtracks, every song starts with this slow kind of pad that opens up everything. Sometimes they're short, sometimes they're long, and it's an idea I take from Arabic music, which whenever these like big performances by some of the older Arab musicians, they had 7, 8, 9 minute intros before the musician says a word, and it's this orchestral stuff. So I thought I'd love to maybe use the intro of the dwarf kind of digging and stuff as the pad with the and I asked Kit Fox, I asked Tarn, I was like, are we gonna have a little video at the beginning of the game that's like that? And they're like, probably not. I was like, oh, but I'll at least try to include it into the song. And so I stitched that in as well at the start. So a couple of pads, I spaced it out, put it on opposite speakers, did a bunch of stuff like that, and then I sent that Frankenstein stitched Dwarf Fortress theme to Simon, and I was like, can you play this? And he was like, absolutely not. give me some time, and maybe I'll be able to play it because I haven't played it in a really long time.
Yeah. So okay. So it's a combination of the two songs that were in the game, right? We took the parts that meshed, or actually Dabu chose the parts that sounded good, and we ended up with what we have. To play it was a challenge, actually, because it's Tony plays in a style that I do not play in, but I wanted to do it justice, So I was practicing a lot more for this song than any of the other ones that I composed, because my hands go where I want them to when I'm composing the song, right? So when I'm doing a solo or whatever, like a riff or a rhythm section, like it does what my brain tells me to, but to do the gymnastics with my hands to play the chord that or to finger the notes that Tony chose, my brain was like, why are you doing this? You're not in the right part of the guitar, So there was like a lot of mental friction, at least for me, to learn that song. But I'm glad we got to it in the end. But yeah, it's definitely my favorite song. I mean, I still listen to it now. When I play the game, I actually I like to listen to it every now and then on loop. The original.
We kept recording it over and over and over again. We'd send version after version after version. And then to the point where I remember sending one of those final versions to a professor that taught me in university. And I was like, listen, this is where I'm at. This is what's going on. I don't know how to fix this. And it's driving us up the wall. And he kind of gave us, I'm not going to go into that, but he gave us a couple of ideas that ended up working well. And he rightfully said, you should lean into the hiss, right? Like if you're recreating this poorly recorded guitar piece, it almost is a disservice for it to be pure and clean and perfect. And I think you should kind of lean into the hiss, lean into the sound, lean into the shittiness, the grungy kind of crappy quality of it all. And I feel like we did, and it ended up working for the best. And then once I got that Frankenstein stitched version back from Simon, I added a couple of what people call the Tristram mandolin plucking on top of the theme that Tarn wrote, and a couple of guitars here and there, some more pads just to flesh it out, and made it a whole song, sent it to Tarn. And I remember his response, he's like, wow, this is really all of it. It's got everything, it covers all the grounds, and it ended up working. But I'm glad we didn't do a remaster and we did a reimagining. I think that was, again, the right choice, for us at least. I asked him, I was like, what do you think? And my favorite part of all of the stuff that Tarn wrote is that main theme that we repeat in the theme that we did for the Steam release. And it repeats over and over, and it has that vocal on top of it. And I remember that I had added the vocal a little bit later. And the only kind of big change Simon made was moving that vocal to the beginning. And I think it works way better with the decision that he made. And he eventually kind of Frankenstein stitched, transcribed what I had sent him on a guitar. And I was like, I think if we record this properly, it could work. I really like. I think it's already I get the impression that it's already a popular one. But Drinking Industry is one that I think, if I can say, I think we nailed, kind of. Drinking Industry, why I find it fun is on the YouTube version of both Drinking Industry and the other kind of big vocal one, which is Sisters of War from Adventure Mode. On the YouTube versions, there's like a sound design that sets the stage. It's like a minute long. And I remember those are just Simone going like, what if, I imagine they might be walking through the snow and going through here and going there and coming home and opening the door and everybody looks at him and says this and that's just his kind of imagination of what the story and the lore of the song and the performance is. And then I would just geek out as a sound designer and add all of those little things, because he had done that on, I think, Tancred Basher or Danger Room, where there's like little story that's being told in audio.
It's a lot of stories, right? There's a lot of, there are two famous fortresses with murder in the title.
And so I had a lot of fun creating all of those sounds, and then also screaming Ilun Kinem to the point where I got a noise complaint, and this lady came, knocked on my door. And I opened the door and she was like, there is someone yelling very loudly in the bedroom. And I had to apologize profusely, and I couldn't explain to her that, oh yes, I'm working on a soundtrack and I'm a dwarf who's yelling, hail everybody, hello, it's me again.
Actually, the lyric writing for Finken Industry took, at least from what I remember, took much longer for me than the composition part. So once I had the riff, that part, I was like, okay, I'm gonna build some stuff around this and ship it. But then I had to sing, I had to learn the lyrics, as it were, and I try to sound as if it's my native language and sing in a register that's lower than my actual speaking voice. But at some point you just go into dwarf mode and then everything changes.
We recorded all of that stuff in a closet. Same thing with the Sisters of War, all recorded in a closet, and faked all of the choir stuff. We faked all of the sound effects. Everything sounds huge and big, but it's all just sound design tricks and stuff.
For about 3 years, they toiled away on the soundtrack, working on music for Dwarf Fortress, while Tarn was plucking away at the behind-the-scenes coding to make the game what it is today. But at some point, this all had to release. The public had to see it, and I was curious what that experience was like, and when did they begin working on additional music?
A lot of people talk about like Dwarf Fortress and how it changed their life when they played the game and how attached they are to the game. And I have the same experience, but very different. I am forever attached by the people who made the game, by the people I met making the game, rather than the game itself. And I'm constantly in awe by both the people who are working on it and also the people who play it, because they're just such a lovely community. And coming from other games, call them gamers with a capital G, gaming community can be pretty rough, right? Like it can be pretty rough, can be pretty mean. And so the reception was amazing because people were so hungry and so willing to help out Tarn and love the game, because it's not like the product is bad, right? It's he's put his heart and soul, him and Zach have put their heart and souls into this game, and you can tell. And so we wanted to put our heart and souls into the music, and we tried to the best of our ability. And especially for me, being the who's this person working on Dwarf Fortress that we've never heard about, it was scary to kind of put yourself out there. And the community was extremely receptive. They seemed to like the soundtrack. They seemed to want more of the soundtrack. And it's one of those projects that I'm attached at the hip by, and I have no problems with that whatsoever. So I'm more than pleased. I never expected in my wildest dreams to work on a game with such positive reception for both the game and the music. There was a lot going on. I know that the success for Tarn, all the steam, the money coming in, lives were changed, things were happening. But I think me and Simone were like, okay, so we had all these songs that we didn't get to work on, and we could put those in adventure mode. And then Simone, started a family, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll just silo and work on a bunch of drafts, and I'm gonna send you a bunch of stuff so that after you have the time, you'll be able to look at them. So, and it no longer became about the contracts and the money, and it never really was, to be honest with you. You don't go into this kind of line of work for the money to start, at least, and we were really happy that it was well received, but that we were gonna get to make more of it. And I think Simone, especially, who's been working on this game as a hobby for as long as he can remember, to be validated and to be requested to make more music is a privilege for sure. We had always known that there was going to be adventure mode. And there was a bunch of stuff in the game to come. There was the conversation of myth and magic. It really didn't take long for us to spin up the conversation, at least to say, okay, we do want another soundtrack. Fortress Mode's development was longer, right? First it was a couple of songs for a couple of seasons, then we brought in more collaborators, and then we changed that collaborator, like a compilation album, to a full-on collaboration. So I got to learn a lot about Simone. Simone got to learn a lot about me, and we both improved our respective fields, right? Like we both got better at what we do. So when Adventure Mode came around, I think Simone was really busy with personal stuff, and I was just like, okay, no worries. I think the only song that was kind of floating was Life of Adventure, that he sent me some snippet of. But other than that, there was, I know, Two Coins and Pony Rider were also kind of like small snippets that were shown once upon a time. But the main ones that we wanted to hit, I think, were, we need another rowdy track, like we need to hit a vocal thing. And there was a conversation of making the entire album just vocal songs. But given Simone's like personal life and the production that would need to go into that, I don't think we'd have enough time. And I think there was like a charm of having one big rowdy song per album. Outside of that, and outside of another Death Spiral Game Over type song, it was whatever we wanted.
I think we experimented a bit, because we kind of, I feel like we kind of established the vibe with the first album. And so now we can kind of push the boundaries a little bit. I guess maybe we did that subconsciously. It's not like we sat down with the committee and said, okay, where can we do this and that? It was more like, I think this sounds like it would be in the album, when we would be pitching ideas. And then we'd go with it and end up with whatever. Navidas, for example, was one of the earliest ones that Dabu pitched, for instance, for the Adventure soundtrack. And we just released it, like a few months ago.
There was, those couple of snippets. And then I really wanted to do Strike the Earth Part 2 because no idea why Strike the Earth was so popular. I don't think either of us understand that, but all of our songs are like our children, so we were like, okay, this is our favorite child now. And so Strike It Again was a really fun one to go back to.
For my part, Pony Rider and Two Coins were ones that I had in my repertoire since I think 2018, maybe, or 2019, but I never really got them at a place where I liked them, and so we reworked them a little bit just for the adventure track. The process, it was different. I got better equipment, for instance. I improved my studio for recording, so you should hear better sound quality. We're constantly generating stuff and like thinking of ideas, and Dabu can tell you, I've told him many times, I've got a bunch of hundreds of MP3s on my computer from just little snippets that I've recorded for ideas and little things that I can try. And I'm nowhere near working through that list. And
I think the first song I made that I sent over to Simone was Night Creature, and I was singing the didn't think that was going to stick around. I was just like, just a vocal thing. And he's the our translator. So I just say hello, Simone, does this make sense? I wrote this, and he's like, yes, you got to change this word. This one will make a little less sense. This will make a little more sense. So because he's the linguist expert when it comes to Dwarven stuff. But not much in terms of we had a bunch of leftover songs or anything. It was shorter. I think the first time I file dumped all of the drafts to Simone, there's only one song that we cut because we didn't think it was up to the quality standards of Dwarf Fortress, and that song just sits on a shelf somewhere to be revisited one day. But otherwise, it was much faster, it was much better, the creative process was flowing a lot more easily, the quality of the sounds, we invested in improving the studios, getting better microphones, better stuff, more recording techniques, learned from the mistakes of the first soundtrack.
I think every Dwarf Fortress story is canonical at this point, right? I mean, so much can happen that we can just say of course that's Dwarf Fortress, and Drunken Cats, that's Dwarf Fortress. We didn't want to just do another drink in the industry, those kinds of songs can get old fast if you just repeat the same story. If you know what I mean, we kind of have like a lore for the more rowdy songs, like three dwarves that travel around and go to different fortresses or find themselves in certain situations. So there are kind of like more or less three dwarves. The Crow Skulls, I think the name we came up with, which is also the name we chose for our studio or label or what label. Sorry, yeah, it's kind of fun to work with because it's like I think it's three siblings, right? And I don't know, you just have to play Dwarf Fortress to imagine what kind of shenanigans they come up with, right? Or they find themselves in. And I think I was playing a fortress, and I had like a lot of female dwarves, and I thought like, okay, maybe there is like a fortress that only has females, and all of them are like badass warriors, and maybe the musician siblings could go to this fortress, you know. So yeah, try to keep it fresh, you know. I mean, next fortress might not even, or the next rowdy song might not even be in a fortress. I don't know. I don't give anything away. I'm not gonna start brainstorming now either, but I want to. That's the thing.
Would you be interested in doing like the adventure mode vinyl? And for us, we're like, yeah, absolutely. This is a no-brainer. We don't care. You don't need to pay us. Just release the vinyl and we'll be happy.
Surreal. Absolutely surreal. It's I don't know. I just kind of like, oh, okay, thanks. You know, what am I supposed to do with this thing? It's nice. It's definitely a nice feeling, but it's also kind of overwhelming, I guess. I used to burn CDs and try to sell them at the shows. I did when I was just starting out, but no, nothing like this. I don't know, man. I don't know. I honestly don't know if what's on the table or what isn't. I don't know. You should ask Dabu.
In terms of what am I excited for, I feel like I will sort of answer your question about when's the third one coming out. I think never. But that doesn't mean there's no more Dwarf Fortress music. I think it's just going to be coming out a little bit more slowly, and I think the third one is going to probably be a compilation of the things we release over the course of the next years, right? I know 2 came out last year. There was Danger Room remaster, because we really wanted to put the Danger Room remaster in adventure mode and weren't able to, but managed to fit it on the adventure mode vinyl because we thought that was pretty important. Nabidas just came out. I think you'll see another at least 2 to 4 tracks come out in the next year or so. But what's to come after that, I don't know. And it's kind of like the same I don't know that you get from what's to come from Dwarf Fortress, right? Like how much more is there coming there? Who knows? We'll see. Would I like to work on a third one? I'd like to work on a third, a fourth, a fifth. I have no problem making more music until we are creatively dry of ideas. And knowing Simon and the wizard he is at what he does, I don't think he's done anytime soon. It means a lot to me. I love the people. I'm constantly just so impressed by everyone, whether it's in the music or in the art or in the programming or just Tarn and Zach as people, individuals. So whenever I get the opportunity to work on the game for pay, for free, whatever it is, I would take that opportunity. So I look forward to continuing working with Zach, Tarn, Tanya, Kid Fox, Simon, even on projects outside of Dwarf Fortress. And that's something we've discussed personally between each other, where it's like, hey, what if we made music for other games? Wouldn't that be cool? And I think that might happen one day. And so I look forward to that.
I don't know if it's like something that I necessarily need people to hear, but this game is great. It inspires me so clearly. You know, I can draw a line in my life where I discovered it, and how it affected my thought patterns, even to an extent. Because you kind of you have to really think in terms of systems to play the game. So it's definitely had a massive impact on me artistically. And I mean, geez, I became a programmer because I thought, like, okay, I'm going to try to do something like this. Right? So it's definitely been a massive inspiration for me. And I want people to continue playing the game. And I'll try to make more music for it. I think it deserves it.
There's a little surprise, but it's more of a surprise and a thing for me and Simone than it is for anyone else, that there's a little dedication on this second vinyl album because, my father passed away, Simone's mom passed away, and so we kind of dedicated this album to them.
While it might not be obvious from the surface, this video took a lot of time to produce. And I want to thank you, the person who made it to the end, and is still watching the video, because, frankly, these videos wouldn't be possible without individuals like you. This is a much more niche piece of content than I'm used to making, in a channel that's already extremely niche, and I just want to remind everybody, if you like the work that I do and you would like to support it directly, the best place to do that is through my blog. You'll get a somewhat weekly blog post where I talk about things from behind the scenes of making stuff like this, and there is an option similar to Patreon to support the channel on a monthly basis. Unlike Patreon, I get 99.9% of the profits. All I have to pay are Stripe fees, unlike Patreon taking a massive cut of the income itself. Thank you very much for watching. I'm happy that you made it to the end, and I hope to see you in the next one.